Welcome, friends, to our weekly community class video, which gets posted here on my YouTube channel every Friday morning. Hope this finds you well. This week, I want to just do a little bit of a short class to address a couple of questions that I've gotten and some conversations that I've been having lately. This is something I've wanted to talk about for a while, so let's get into it. And the topic of the week is green sorcery. Why sorcery? This word has so many connotations, so many assumptions, so many layers and nuances. Even folks who sort of practice and live within the context of animism, paganism, nature-based spirituality, all of that can get their feathers ruffled a little bit by this word because over the ages it has become wrapped up with nefarious, negative, malefic works so much, which is funny to me because the more embraced terms like witch actually have more historical connection to malefic work than sorcery does. So it's an interesting bias that we've created for ourselves. So why sorcery? First, I love this term because of the way that I define it. And I know lots of other folks define sorcery the same way, but there's definitely some divergence in how this term gets defined. So I just want to clarify, this is my definition. My experience and understanding of sorcerous work is that sorcery is focused and concerned entirely about the reality of spirits and our ability to cultivate and nourish relationships of power with them, working relationships, and not with systems of religion, dogma, or religious structure. So we can unpack that a little bit, although it's a relatively straightforward statement. It really doesn't have a lot of depth. It kind of is what it is, which is what I like about it. And that is, sorcery does not imply religion. It does not imply somebody ascribing to a set of religious beliefs. It doesn't even necessarily assume that a person practicing sorcery in a specific culture or within a specific, ethnic group or a specific religious dominant group worries too much about what everybody else thinks, which I, of course, very much appreciate. But that the person, the sorcerer, the person doing sorcerous works, is more concerned with having real, tangible, meaningful, actionable, valuable connections with non-human persons. That's all that matters. If that happens to overlap with dominant religions or cultural trends or ethnic trends or whatever, fine, totally fine, but it's not necessary. Other aspects of folk magic, folk religion, folk healing tend to dovetail with the predominant religion of a group, or at least use the language, the worldview, the cosmogony, the cosmology of that dominant religion to sort of hold itself together. Sorcery doesn't care, doesn't matter. The relationships matter, the actual effect of the work matters, the experience of the sorcerer matters, and everything else is left to the people who find value in everything else, right? So this isn't to say that to do plant spirit work, one has to ascribe to a sorceress path. It's not the case at all. This is just one way to do it. It's a way that I do it. But I hold sorcery in one hand and I hold a deep reverence and connection to the lore, the plant lore, the spiritual lore of my deep ancestors in the other hand. It's possible to do both. Let each of them inform the other to create sort of a tertiary expression of spiritual work. So sorcery is really about the doing, right? It's about us placing the relationships that we cultivate above everything else. And it is not for everyone because that structure, the framework of a religion, of a dogma, of a cultural way of doing things is not there, or is very minimized in the practice. so that all of the space is freed up, all of the airwaves are cleared for the sorcerer to learn directly from the spirits, to be initiated directly by the spirits, to be informed directly by their work with the spirits. So this relates to our plant spirit work in the sense that, and this is why I say green sorcery, because we're not doing goetic sorcery or, Key of Solomon sorcery or any of that. Not to say there couldn't be overlap, there could, which is not what I do. I work with the plant spirits. So green sorcery or plant spirit sorcery means that pretty much all of our work goes to cultivating and nourishing relationships with individual plant spirits, but also the plant spirits all. That the idea of the fullness of plant spirits and their realm, the green realm, the world of spirit where they are rooted. And so we sort of step into this very dynamic, very evolutionary, very relevant relationship with the plants that informs pretty much everything we do. If the plants teach us a cosmogony that differs from the prevailing cosmogony of larger religions or of our culture or even of our family, we go with the plants. We go with what the plants say. If there is an established plant lore, let's say from British plant lore, that has a plant, really well explained, really well understood through ages and ages and ages of experience, but that particular plant here in America teaches me something different, I, of course, again, want to hold the duality of my gnosis and the lore at once, but my personal relationship to the plant will always be the loudest voice in the room, because relationships are dynamic, meaning that any plant spirit or any spirit in general that I work with will teach me based on who I am. So the teachings are all very personal. They're all very relevant for me, for the work I do. A plant might give me specific teachings because I am a full-time herbalist. My entire life is spent giving people plant medicine. So a plant might unfold mysteries for me that may be different from maybe somebody they teach who's an artist or a mechanic or a chef. So this way of sorcery means that we always receive information that is hyper relevant for who we are, who we be, where and when we are, what we do, what our sphere of influence is, right? And that's very important. Sorcerers and the sorcerous arts, I believe, have been demonized and vilified over the ages, partly because some sorcerers are up to some sketchy stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, there's that for sure. But mostly because the sorcerous arts do step out of the norm. They intentionally distance themselves from the status quo. And that means that they're very hard people to control. And we know through all of our varied experiences that when people can't be controlled, one of the ways that they are either kind of disconnected from the community or subjugated so they can be controlled is to just vilify them, right? Just demonize them. And then, they're ostracized to the point that they come crawling back, or they get cut off enough that we don't have to worry about them anymore. So this is very much sorcery, and why it is a feared art, because when people step into these personal relationships with the spirits, they cut out all the middlemen, right? Suddenly, they wield a lot of power. Now, it's not necessarily their own power. It is power based on their relationships of otherness, but power nonetheless. And this creates a duality of fear and respect, traditionally amongst societies and cultures where, sorcery existed and exists, and where sorcerers were given space and continue to be given space in some cultures. There is really interesting overlap, anthropologically speaking, Let's be very clear about that, because I'm about to use some words that I never use outside of an anthropological discussion. Very interesting overlap between our more scientific, more sociological explorations of the idea of shamanism and our discussions of the same sort around sorcery. In fact, many of the texts that I've read, scholarly academic works, can oftentimes use the term shaman and sorcerer interchangeably. And lots of folks have found that indigenous words, so words that have arisen within indigenous cultures, especially indigenous cultures that are still practicing an animistic visionary tradition, the words that those folks use to describe some of what anthropologists would call shamanic practices, not shamanism in the Tungus Siberian specific context, but shamanic practice, things that sort of look shamanic, are best translated as sorcery. So this is something I find interesting. Again, I very, very rarely use the word shaman because of how it has been exploited and misused and misrepresented by everybody. But there's no denying the fact that the term shamanic practice, shamanic ideas, has not been an incredibly helpful shortcut linguistically when talking about these sorcerous things that we see repeated in pretty much every animistic tradition from the beginning of time. So that's helpful with language. You know, the shortcomings of the English language when it comes to talking about spiritual things becomes very apparent when we see how often we have to co-opt and misappropriate words from other cultures in order to get the point across. So there's that. We're working on it, right? We're always trying to find creative ways to have these discussions. So green sorcery is a fiercely independent, fiercely dynamic, incredibly organic experience of relating person to person with the plant spirits all, with individual plant spirits, with the guardians, the old gods, the deities who reside or are connected to plant spirit work, to the good folk, the fae, the mighty dead, the ancestors, the spirits of the place, in a way that allows the information to go heart to heart. Now, sorcery can absolutely be the keystone that leads to a tradition of magico-ritual practice. Sorcerers can teach other sorcerers and hand-on information. We see this very much in the grimoire traditions, where things are written down. One sorcerer's experience of a spirit and lessons from a spirit are passed on to a student in order to help that student not have to reinvent the wheel and to initiate them into a relationship that is already vibrant. But there always has to be room for personal experience. There always has to be room for a plant spirit to teach somebody medicine, to teach somebody magic, to teach somebody ritual in a way that speaks directly to the who of that person, rather than to a structure or a systemized belief situation, right? Like a religion. So we're seeing some really interesting things right now where folks who are working the dual faith, who are practicing sorcery in one hand, usually the left, and are also engaging with the established structures of a more dominant religion. Generally, Catholicism works pretty well with this because Catholicism is very easy to syncretize. So we're seeing a lot of these dual faith traditions start to pop up right now. I think they've probably always existed outside of the syncretizing structures, which have been preservation for so many marginalized indigenous traditions. But, you know, we're seeing these really interesting blends happen right now. So even that's possible, you know. So the reason I bring that up is that if you are part of an established tradition or even a religion, there can be ways to work sorcery into that. But you have to be able to sort of hold two opposing tools in two hands. You have to kind of be able to switch between the two. And then the real art is how to take the dogma, the lore, the structure in one hand, and the personal gnosis, the vision in the other hand, and keep them both separate, let them both be what they are, but allow their light to kind of mingle and create a third expression, and that becomes the path. So it's a little more complicated, a little complicated for my brain, simple brain, but it's very cool nonetheless that we are finding ways to allow sorcerous workings to trickle back into our consciousness in a way that is actionable. And this is a very important thing about sorcery too. If it's not helpful, if the relationships with the spirits are not healing you, helping you resolve blockages, obstacles, helping you become more the best version of yourself, or in a vocational sense, if the sorcerous relationships are not allowing you to better serve your community, to make better medicine, to make better rituals, to be a better go-between from our world and the world of spirit, then it's not really sorcery. You know, sorcery is actionable and it's practical. That what we are receiving from all of the devotion and the time invested in these relationships actually creates positive change. It actually creates harmony in the world. Otherwise, it's generally just folks kind of hanging out in an echo chamber, enjoying hearing things that, hearing things they want to hear. And when we see that, we know that the person is probably not making authentic connection to non-human persons, but is sort of just talking to themselves, right? And it happens. Like, I think we all kind of start there, and it evolves, and we learn to differentiate the voices of otherness from the voices of our very complicated internal tapestry. So sorcery is practical. It means something. It does something in the world, nudging us closer and closer into states of harmony, whether that's personal, community, global, universal, however you want to look at it. It is organic. It arises spontaneously as relationships are wont to do, right? Think about any relationship you've ever had, the weird ways they start, the weird ways you cross paths with somebody, and how it goes from that first moment. One moment ago, you had no idea who that person was. The next moment you're in relationship, and it evolves from there. This is no different. It takes work. It's organic. It's dynamic. There are ups and downs. There are moments of quiet. There are moments of intense engagement. And that's really it. It's actionable, and it's organic, and it's real. It's visceral. And that's what we're seeking in sorcerous work, is how to really approach and engage with the reality of non-human persons and utilize those relationships in a non-transactional way, utilize those relationships to better the fullness of things, not only our side of the hedge, but the spirit side of the hedge, because we also bring virtue to the table. As humans, it's important to remember that we also have value. So, a little introduction. In future classes, we're going to go pretty deep into the idea of green sorcery. And if you're interested in this topic, come join us in the Grove. This is my online course platform. All the courses are there. Take them when you want, how you want, in what order you want, over and over again, revisit, whatever. I want to make it accessible, and there's of course some community stuff there and guided plant journeys that we do together monthly and all that stuff. So if you want to dig in, there's a link down in the video comments here. Come check it out, see what we're up to, come take some deeper courses. And of course we'll keep these weekly classes coming as well, and just see where the plant spirits take us.